The topic tonight is managing our anxiety and fears. What are you so afraid of? We are privileged and honored to have with us tonight. We are connecting New York, London, and Israel. And it is our honor and our pleasure to have with us Rabbi Manis Friedman, leading spiritual thinker and social philosopher. And this is Real Talk, a real conversation.
If you had to pinpoint the ultimate bottom line cause, why do we have so much anxiety? What would be your first guess?
I'm happy to go. I think the fear of the past and of the future, that's how I would best describe it. It can be either or, either worrying about what's going to happen or rethinking, rehashing what has happened and what could have happened instead. That's how I would define it.
I would also add a kind of a layer of what's in your control and what's not in your control. I probably, I don't want to speak for everyone in the world, but I probably worry more about the things that are out of my control than in my control, because if they're in my control, I feel I can steer them in a certain direction in my favor. But if they're not, they're obviously beyond my own power, and that lack of control creates unease because it could affect the outcome that I want or don't want.
So would you say there's a difference between fear and anxiety?
Yeah, I would say so. I think there's something more, almost more internal, more intimate about anxiety. And there's something, I can see a cause, like I think the cause for fear is something that you can identify maybe more easily than the cause of anxiety, which sounds like a more nebulous concept to me.
If you're in war, I think it's very natural to be fearful of death, whereas anxiety is how your mind adds more thoughts and complexity to any situation, whether it's war or not in war, and can create something out of nothing. Whereas fear, I think, in its most basic sense and how humans react is actually very natural, and I would add very healthy.
If fear is externally caused from an external source, whereas anxiety is just a description of you. You're afraid of something, but your anxiety is just you. I'm an anxious person. If we were to look for a solution to anxiety, where would we begin? A change of lifestyle isn't going to do it. Wherever you go, you take your anxiety with you. So where do we begin to look for a solution to anxiety?
I do believe that there is a notion of the impact of the environment on yourself as well. Especially, after this year of COVID, there's been a lot of work on your self-esteem, work on yourself, and it's very, very, very self-centered. And I think we all are, and it's amazing to invest in yourself so you can give more and all of those things. But I'm wondering, if you wish, what is the right balance between finding the answer within yourself, but also keeping in mind more of an outwards thinking perspective. So there's probably a bit of both. It's within yourself, but there is something about the environment too, I would say.
By environment, you mean life, reality,
relationships, the impact of the people we decide to surround ourselves with, the activities we decide to dedicate time to. All of this also, I think, can change profoundly how we feel on a daily basis. And I think that's not to be underestimated.
I know people who are impressively fearless, but they're so anxious. They're riddled with anxiety. So another definition. What is there a difference, or is there a relationship between anxiety and uncertainty?
Yeah, I would personally say that there is a a very direct relationship. I don't know if it's exactly one for one and they're identical siblings or two sides of the same coin, but they're definitely very, very close, frighteningly so.
The larger the scope of possibilities is, potentially the more anxiety it can also generate.
Yeah, more choices, more confusion, more uncertainty, more anxiety. So the solution is stop listening to the news, don't read newspapers, limit your horizons, don't know too much and you'll be okay. You know, like in the olden days. In the olden days, people had real fears, but very little anxiety, because they knew exactly what's going to be. If your father is a farmer, you're going to be a farmer. And when you're a farmer, this is what you do. No anxiety. But if the rain doesn't come in time, or the bugs come and eat your crops, that's a fear. So let's think this again. If anxiety is closely related, at least closely related to uncertainty, what's the solution?
You know, it's creating a sense of certainty, but I feel more than that, it's probably a sense of safety rather than a sense of certainty, I would say. And regardless of the level of uncertainty that you have, bringing it back to, I don't know if it's a sense of control, as Julien was saying at the beginning, but bringing it back to things that are comprehensible, understandable, I think is a coping mechanism. I don't know if it's the total solution to anxiety, but it's definitely a coping mechanism at least.
The more certainties, right? The more certainties we have, the less uncertainty. But what can we be certain of?
I think it's, I wouldn't want to try and simplify things in an effort to control them more, or at least feel in control. I think it's just becoming comfortable with not entirely being in control. And I think having faith, and that means that word may mean a few different, some different things to different people in different ways, but just believing that, that it's okay not to control everything and to have that uncertainty and that it's part of life. And actually very much acknowledging, I think one of the ways that I've come to appreciate that the most is realizing there's actually many things which I have no control over, and things generally work out fine.
I remember seeing, one of these thought message signs in an office. This sign said, "If you can be calm under the circumstances, you don't understand the circumstances." It's almost like we're designed to not know. We are designed to not be certain, as if that's good or necessary. So yes, I agree. The more comfortable we get with the simple fact that we don't know, we can't be certain of anything, and that's not our place or our role. In other words, I don't have to be certain of anything in order to live a productive life. And we live a productive life almost miraculously, because we don't know what we're doing. We don't know where we're coming from, we don't know where we're going, and yet, if we do things right, we have a meaningful life. So there's this little prayer that we say in the morning. It's a little prayer we say early in the morning before we actually start the body of the prayer, of the morning prayer. And it basically says, "God, please protect me from slander, false witnesses, false accusations, strange occurrences," a whole list of things. But basically, it is the list of those things that we cannot protect ourselves from. So it is so healthy to wake up every morning and say, okay, these are the things I have no control over. So hey, it's up to you, God. I'm not going to worry about it, because there's nothing I can do about it. Anxiety is produced partially by the false impression that if I knew, then I would be safe. No, I wouldn't. Security doesn't come from knowing. Security comes from humility, from being comfortable with the fact that I don't know, I don't have to know, because I'm not running the world. No matter how much you know, you're not safe. You're never going to be safe. It's just the nature of being created. Unless you are the creator, you can never be secure. So the strongest person is the most humble person. And humble doesn't mean I think I'm stupid. That's not humility. That's being stupid. Humility means it's not really about me. I'm as smart as they say I am. And I'm as capable as I am. And I'm better than most people at certain things. But it's not about me. If it's not about me, I don't need to be in control. I turn control over to God. And I say, God, you control the world. Let me live a meaningful life. We are vulnerable beings. There's no use denying it. The danger is that we look to the wrong places for our security. We rely on false gods. You see, idolatry is the biggest of sins because you're putting your trust in something that is not trustworthy. And that's going to really be damaging and in the long term, very destructive. You end up defending your God rather than having your God defend you. So you end up fighting a war to prove that your God is more reliable. It's really psychologically horrible and morally destructive.
So I have a question for you here, because obviously having a sense of purpose is having a sense of direction, and therefore you could say an antidote to anxiety. But the reverse sort of thought would be to say, well, holding yourself accountable for higher standards of morality, pursuing a purpose that you have set for yourself, that is something you want to aspire to, that can also generate its own dose of anxiety.
Yeah, because it's your idea. You can't solve the anxiety and uncertainty by what you have, because nothing you have is certain. So you come up with a plan, with an idea, with a goal, with a value system, but then who says your value system is valid? So anything we produce on our own is not going to take away that feeling of pettiness. I mean, even people, the Jews in Israel, who are uncertain of their right to be in the country, the insecurity of not knowing for sure that this land is our land, that's debilitating. It's dangerous. So where do we get real direction, purpose that is solid? Only if we were created that way. If we were created to a purpose, not one of our own making. See, again, that's idolatry. If I come up with my own values and then worship them, that's called idolatry. But if in fact I exist for a purpose, not one that I made up, and for that purpose I have to sacrifice everything because it is real, then I have solid foundation for whatever else I'm going to be doing. So here's young people, I'm talking children, 10-year-olds are saying, I didn't ask to be born. Why am I here? I have to honor my parents? For what? For giving birth to me? Well, thank you very much. Why was I born? So unless everything goes my way, and then I'll accept life, okay, that's fine. But if it doesn't go my way, well, who did this to me? I think that's where the anger comes from. You gave me an existence, but you cannot tell me why and what for. That's enough to get you angry. You give birth to me without my consent and then tell me that I'm responsible for everything in life? How does that work?
How much anxiety is inherent to someone? You know, we have this way of saying, oh yeah, this person is very anxious by nature. So I'm thinking, how much is this something that is within you, and that might vary across people, versus something that you sort of like nurture and that comes from other factors. And the reason this is sort of like a question that's at the back of my head is, from a lot of what you're saying, it feels like the sense of purpose, the sense of, you know, sort of being here for a reason comes a lot from being very basic, the love of your parents, the cultural heritage that you have, and all of the things that you're being sort of like transmitted. So that leads me to thinking, well, maybe one part of the equation is, you know, going back to the example of the teenagers that you saw as well, how much can you equip someone to face life without that anxiety, and how much is that something that you can't really control?
Well, you can think of it in psychological terms. Why are some people more anxious than others? Insecurity, in growing up, a family that wasn't stable, and so on. So it increases your anxiety. But anxiety is a native-born condition. You are born anxious because you're born helpless. You're born dependent. So it is the human condition to be insecure. You know that famous statement from, was it Karl Marx? Religion is the opiate of the masses. The reason we have religion is because we're insecure. And the insecurity forces us to assume that there is a God who's in control and he's your friend, because you're so insecure.
What do you think of that statement?
Well, the obvious question is, to Karl Marx, you know your friend Stalin? He was in control. And he was the most insecure guy in town. He was paranoid. He was afraid of his own shadow. Not believing in God doesn't make you any less insecure. It just makes you a monster. Because you want to create your own security by killing anyone who threatens you, or anything that threatens you. So he's right. He's absolutely right. Religion is the opiate of the masses. But nobody is excluded from that, from the masses. It is a human condition that we need to know what's real and true, because we have a sense that we are temporary and fleeting. So what's really real? It's a legitimate insecurity. And if you don't admit to it, you're just kidding yourself. And that's part of our humility. That's part of our humanity. The recognition that I didn't create this world. It's not my world. Even my life is not for me or about me. It must serve some purpose, but by itself it is not justified. Just being is not justified. Now, why is that? A woman said to me many years ago, I was just out of yeshiva. She said, I'm going to kill myself. It's all meaningless. It's terribly meaningless. Nothing has any meaning. I'm going to kill myself. She had a whole plan of how she's going to do it. I naively said to her, really? It's all meaningless? She says, yes. I said, nothing has any meaning. She says, no. I said, then why do you need to kill yourself? Sit. You'll die eventually. What's the difference? It's all meaningless. Luckily, she didn't kill herself. If you think life is really meaningless, why don't you just relax? No worries, no worries. It's all meaningless. No, If you feel like life is meaningless, you become desperate. Why? Because we were created for a purpose, and it is completely against nature to live without purpose. So I wouldn't blame young people if they could articulate their anger. I wouldn't blame them if they said, you brought me into this world, you give me a life, you cannot tell me what it's for, and I can't stand existing for no reason. It goes against the grain. So unless somebody answers my question, I'll break everything and destroy everything and hurt everybody I can. It really, really would be so easy. These people are begging in their violence. They're telling you that they're desperate. They're either going to kill you or they're going to kill themselves, because there's this huge hole in their heart. We are purposeful creatures, and no one will tell me what my purpose is. That's cruel and unusual punishment.
Manis, you mentioned before, you used the word humility as being a central point in overcoming fear and anxiety. Can you just say a little about what humility is? And more importantly, what are the easy ways to ascertain how humble or not humble a person is? And number three, I know this is a whole shopping list, but what simple practical steps can someone take to become a little bit more humble?
So what really is humility? Let's learn humility from God himself, because God is humble. If we look for definitions, which I love to do, humility and vulnerability are very closely related. Vulnerability is not a weakness. Modern psychology has told us that. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It's a strength. But not because strong people can afford to get hurt without being destroyed, whereas weak people, if they're hurt, they're going to be completely destroyed. No, it's not about hurt. Vulnerability has nothing to do with being hurt. It's purely a strength. Because humility means I'm not enough for me. That's vulnerability. Without you, I'm not enough. God created the world. Why? Because there was just him. And he found that unsatisfying. Perfect, infinite, all-powerful, all-knowing, eternal, not enough. Just me, not enough. With you, oh, now it's good. Where does God say this? He said it very loud and clear. And God said it is not good to be alone. It's not good to be alone. Why? Because it's just you. And when it's just you, there's no goodness. There's perfection. But what's good about perfect? What's good about it? I am all capable, all knowing, all powerful. Yeah, and that's me. What's good about that? God is perfect, and yet he creates a world? Why? If I were perfect, I wouldn't create a world. Who needs it? I'm perfect. If I were perfect, would I need you? No. That's wrong. When I am perfect, that's when I really need you. Because what's the point of being perfect? So God is vulnerable. That's the first thing we learn about God in the Torah. In the beginning, when there was just him, God created the world. Without me, you're not perfect, and with me, you are? Wow. How humble is that? So you see, if we were going to teach morality, this would be the first message. God needs you. God depends on you. God is hoping every day that you join him in making the world perfect. That is the beginning or the basis of all humility and all vulnerability. And we have to teach our children. Vulnerable is not a weakness.